Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The smell of charcoal and blooming roses always takes me back to that Saturday in June. It's funny, isn't it? How a scent can just unlock a whole memory, like a key turning in a rusty old lock. Our annual summer barbecue. It was supposed to be like all the others. Comfortable, a little chaotic, filled with the usual family banter. Uncle Joe's slightly off-key jokes and my famous potato salad that everyone pretends they can replicate, but never quite get right. But that year turned out to be something else entirely. Something that still makes my heart feel a little fuller, a little softer, whenever I think about it. It was the year my husband's brother, David, did something that left every single one of us utterly, completely silent. And believe me, silencing our boisterous clan is no small feat. My name is Sarah, and I've been married to Tom for going on 30 wonderful, sometimes perplexing years. Tom's a good man, solid and dependable as an old oak tree. He likes his routines, his golf on Sundays, and his belief that he's the undisputed grill master of the Western Hemisphere. His family is, well, their family. Loud, loving, a bit set in their ways, but good people, you know? We've built a nice life, Tom and I. The kids are grown and mostly flown, leaving us with a house that's a little too quiet sometimes, and a garden I pour all my spare energy into. That garden, with its unruly roses and stubborn hydrangeas, was looking its absolute best that June afternoon, almost as if it knew it was going to be the backdrop for something extraordinary. The preparations for the barbecue had started days before, as they always did. Lists were made, groceries bought in quantities that could feed a small army, and the perennial debate over whether Tom's secret ingredient for the marinade actually made a difference was reignited. It's mostly paprika, for goodness sake, but don't tell him I said that. I'd spent the morning humming to myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for the skewers, kneading dough for the homemade buns, the works. There's a certain rhythm to these preparations that I find comforting, a sense of continuity. David, Tom's younger brother, was always a bit of an enigma in the family. He's a few years younger than Tom, quieter, more introspective. While Tom went into engineering, practical and straightforward, David had drifted through life with a guitar in his hand and a notebook full of what we all assumed were half-finished songs or sketches. He'd had a string of jobs over the years: bookstore clerk, barista, freelance graphic designer for a while, but nothing ever seemed to quite stick. He wasn't unfriendly, not at all, just reserved. He'd show up at family gatherings, offer a polite smile, help out if asked, but he always seemed to be observing from the periphery, never quite in the center of the whirlwind. Some of the aunts would whisper about him needing to find his way or settle down, but I always found his quiet presence rather gentle. There was a sensitivity about him that I suspected most of the family, in their well-meaning boisterousness, often overlooked. Tom loved his brother, of course, in that typically male, undemonstrative way, but even he sometimes seemed unsure how to draw David out. That particular Saturday, the sun was playing peekaboo with the clouds, but the air was warm, promising a perfect afternoon. The patio was set up with extra tables and chairs. The string lights we'd hung between the maple tree and the porch were twinkling merrily even in the daylight, and the cooler was stocked to the brim. The first guests started to arrive around 2. Tom's sister, Carol, with her booming laugh and her 2 rambunctious kids who made a beeline for the swing set. Uncle Joe, already sizing up the grill situation with a critical eye. Cousins, nieces, nephews. The yard slowly filled with the happy cacophony of family. David arrived a little later than most, looking much the same as he always did. Faded jeans, a soft, worn t-shirt, his dark hair a little longer than Tom preferred, and that ever-present guitar case slung over his shoulder. He gave me a small, almost shy smile as he came through the side gate.
Hi, Sarah.
Smells amazing as usual. David. Glad you could make it, I said, giving him a quick hug. Everything all right? I don't know why I asked that. Maybe it was a subtle shift in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Yeah, all good, he replied, but his gaze drifted towards the garden for a moment, lingering on the old oak tree at the far end, the one our kids used to climb. There was a wistfulness there that tugged at something in me. He didn't bring his guitar out right away. He usually didn't. Sometimes, late in the evening, if someone specifically pestered him, he might strum a few familiar chords, a Beatles tune or something by James Taylor, his voice pleasant but never showy. But mostly, the guitar stayed in its case, a silent companion. The afternoon unfolded in its usual, pleasant way. Burgers sizzled on the grill, sending plumes of delicious smoke into the air. Kids shrieked with laughter as they chased each other across the lawn, their faces sticky with watermelon juice. Conversations ebbed and flowed, a mixture of catching up, gentle teasing, and the comfortable silences that happen when people know each other well. I moved through the crowd, a hostess on autopilot, refilling drinks, making sure everyone had enough to eat, pausing for a chat here and there. But I found my eyes occasionally drifting towards David. He was sitting on the edge of the patio, nursing a lemonade, listening more than he spoke, as usual. He'd helped Tom with the grill earlier, and then he'd taken a quiet walk around the garden by himself. There was an intensity to his gaze as he looked at the flowers, the trees, almost as if he were memorizing them. Or perhaps saying goodbye. That thought flickered through my mind unbidden, and I quickly dismissed it. Don't be dramatic, Sarah, I told myself. The subtle tension, if I could even call it that, was mostly within me. A heightened awareness of David, a feeling that something was different, even if I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe it was just the way the sunlight caught his profile, or the uncharacteristic stillness about him. Or maybe, just maybe, after all these years, I was finally learning to read the quiet language of my husband's brother. The sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. The main flurry of eating was over, replaced by contented sighs and the clinking of dessert forks against plates of my strawberry rhubarb pie. Some of the older folks were settled into comfortable chairs, swapping stories. The younger kids were getting a second wind, playing tag among the rose bushes, their energy seemingly inexhaustible. It was that golden hour, the part of the barbecue I always loved best, when everything felt mellow and infused with a soft, warm glow. The string lights began to stand out more, casting a magical ambience over the yard. Everything was just as it should be. Or so I thought. I was clearing away some plates, chatting with Carol about her son's upcoming soccer tournament, when I noticed Tom heading over to where David was sitting. Tom clapped him on the shoulder, said something with a grin. David looked up, and for a moment, I saw that flicker again in his eyes. Apprehension, maybe? Or resolve. He nodded slowly at whatever Tom had said. Then, Tom, ever the jovial host, raised his voice a little to address the nearest clusters of family. Hey everyone, quiet down a sec. Looks like Davy boy here has finally decided to earn his supper.
He winked.
A few chuckles rippled through the guests. This was a familiar routine. Tom would good-naturedly rib David about playing something, and David would usually demur, or play something brief and unassuming. David didn't say anything. He just reached for his guitar case. My breath caught in my throat. There was something different about the way he moved. A deliberation. He unlatched the case, and the rich, dark wood of his old acoustic guitar seemed to gleam in the fading light. He didn't look flustered or reluctant. He looked centered. He pulled the guitar out, settled it on his lap, and his fingers, long and surprisingly deft, hovered over the strings for just a moment. A hush began to fall over the patio, not an enforced silence, but a gradual, curious one. People turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the kids, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, seemed to quiet down their game and looked towards the man with the guitar. The air grew still, charged with an unspoken anticipation. I put down the stack of plates, my heart suddenly beating a little faster. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this wasn't going to be just another old Beatles tune. David took a slow breath, his eyes closed for a fraction of a second. When he opened them, he didn't look at Tom or me or any one person in particular. He looked out towards that old oak tree at the edge of the garden, the one he'd been watching earlier. His fingers touched the strings, and the first notes, clear and pure, trembled in the evening air. They weren't familiar. Not a cover tune, not a classic sing-along. This was something else. Something new. The melody was intricate, melancholic, but with an undercurrent of hope that tugged at your heartstrings. It was beautiful, achingly so. And then he started to sing. His voice, when it came, was not the hesitant, quiet tone we were used to. It was stronger, richer, filled with an emotion that was almost raw in its intensity. It wasn't loud, but it commanded attention, weaving through the twilight, wrapping around us like a velvet cloak. The lyrics, oh, the lyrics. They painted pictures, told a story. It was a song about roots, about belonging, about the quiet spaces between people, and the unspoken things that bind a family together, for better or worse. It spoke of seasons changing, of watching life unfold from the shade of a familiar tree, our tree, the one in our yard. There were lines about unspoken gratitude, about finding strength in shared history. Even when that history was complicated, I found myself leaning against the porch railing, my hand unconsciously pressed to my chest. I could feel tears welling in my eyes, and I didn't even try to blink them away. I glanced around. Every single person was still, utterly still. Tom stood frozen, his earlier jovial expression wiped clean, replaced by a look of stunned, profound emotion. His eyes were fixed on his brother, his mouth slightly agape. Carol had her arm around her husband, her head resting on his shoulder, and I could see the glint of tears on her cheeks too. Uncle Joe, usually so quick with a quip, was just staring, his cigar unlit in his hand. Even the children had stopped their play, their small faces turned towards David, sensing the gravity, the beauty of the moment. The song wasn't just about a tree, or a family in general. There were specific little details woven in, things only our family would recognize. A mention of a chipped teacup, a reference to a childhood nickname, a line about the way the porch swing creaked. It was so personal, so intimate, yet universal in its themes of love, loss, and the search for connection. It was as if David had been silently observing us all these years, absorbing every detail, every nuance of our shared lives, and was now pouring it all back out in this incredible, heartfelt testament. He sang of his own struggles too, subtly, poetically, the feeling of being slightly adrift, of searching for his own place in the world, and the quiet solace he'd found in moments of solitude, often right here in this yard, under this sky. As the song neared its end, his voice softened, becoming almost a whisper, but each word was clear, infused with a sincerity that was breathtaking. The final chords hung in the air, shimmering, before slowly fading into silence. A deep, profound silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sounds were the distant chirp of crickets and the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. It wasn't an awkward silence, not at all. It was a silence filled with everything that had just been sung, with awe, with understanding, with a shared emotional experience that had taken us all by surprise. David kept his head bowed for a moment, his fingers resting on the strings of his guitar. The silence stretched, heavy and beautiful. It felt like minutes, though it was probably only 30 seconds or so. In that quiet, it was like we were all seeing David for the first time. Not just Tom's quiet, artistic brother, but a man of deep feeling, profound talent, and incredible courage to share something so vulnerable, so personal, with all of us. The silence was a testament to the power of what he had just done. It was respect. It was love. It was a collective holding of breath before the world rushed back in. And then, slowly, almost reverently, Uncle Joe started to clap. Not his usual boisterous applause, but a soft, rhythmic clapping. Then Carol joined in, then her husband, and then, like a wave, the applause spread, gentle at first, then growing stronger, warmer, washing over David. But it wasn't just applause. I could hear sniffles, quiet murmurs of, "Oh, David," or "That was beautiful." Tom was still standing there, looking poleaxed. He took a shaky step towards his brother, then another. David finally lifted his head, and there were tears tracing paths down his own cheeks, but he was smiling. A real, open smile, a smile that reached his eyes and transformed his face. Tom reached David, and he didn't say a word. He just pulled his brother into a hug, a fierce, heartfelt embrace that spoke volumes more than any words could. I saw David's shoulders shake, and he hugged Tom back just as tightly. Over Tom's shoulder, David's eyes met mine, and in them, I saw a mixture of relief, gratitude, and a kind of quiet joy. I smiled back, my own tears flowing freely now, not of sadness, but of an overwhelming sense of connection and pride. Pride for this man who had finally found his voice, and in doing so, had given us all such an incredible gift. The rest of the evening felt different. The usual light-hearted chatter was still there, but it was softer, gentler. People kept going up to David, not to gush, but to offer a quiet word, a touch on the arm, a shared look of appreciation. He seemed a little overwhelmed by the attention, but in a good way. He was still quiet, David, but something had shifted. A barrier had come down, not just for him, but for all of us. He'd shared a piece of his soul, and in return, he'd received not judgment or polite indifference, but genuine love and acceptance. Later, as I was gathering the last of the dishes, David came over to help. That was something else, David," I said softly, not wanting to break the fragile magic of the evening. He ducked his head a little, that shy smile playing on his lips again.
Thanks, Sarah.
"I've been working on that song for a long time. I wasn't sure if I'd ever play it for anyone. What made you decide to play it tonight?" I asked, genuinely curious. He paused, looking out at the garden, now bathed in the soft glow of the string lights and the moon. "I don't know. It just felt right, like it was time." He then added, so quietly I almost missed it. "Tom asked me to. Earlier. He said he had a feeling I had something I needed to share." I looked towards Tom, who was now deep in conversation with Uncle Joe, but he glanced over at that exact moment and caught my eye, a small, knowing smile on his face. My husband, The man I thought I knew completely still had a few surprises up his sleeve, it seemed. He'd sensed something in his brother that I, for all my observations, hadn't fully grasped until that song. The barbecue wound down slowly. Guests departed with warm hugs and promises to see each other soon, their voices softer than usual as they said their goodbyes. There was a sense of shared intimacy, as if we'd all been part of something sacred. When David left, he gave me another hug. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, "for everything." "Thank you, David," I replied, "for the music. It was the best part of the whole summer." He smiled, that new, open smile, and as he walked down the driveway, guitar case in hand, he seemed to walk a little taller, his steps a little lighter. After everyone was gone, Tom and I sat on the porch swing for a long time, the crickets our only companions. The leftover scent of charcoal mingled with the sweet fragrance of night-blooming jasmine. "He's really something, isn't he?" Tom said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "He is," I agreed, leaning my head on his shoulder. "He really, really is." We sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. The unexpected experience of the evening had settled into a warm glow in my heart. It wasn't just that David had talent. We'd all vaguely known he was musical. It was the vulnerability, the courage it took to lay bare his innermost feelings, his personal struggles, and his love for his family in such a profound way. He hadn't just played a song. He'd opened a door to his heart and invited us all in. And in doing so, he'd given us a chance to connect with him and with each other on a much deeper level that I thought about all the years David had been the quiet one on the sidelines, the one people made assumptions about. Perhaps we hadn't listened closely enough. Perhaps we hadn't known how to. But tonight, he'd made us listen. He'd shown us who he was, not with explanations or apologies, but with the pure, unadulterated truth of his art. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the song in my mind. The melody, the words, the way David's voice had soared with such unexpected power and tenderness. It was a moment of personal discovery, not just about David, but about the nature of family, about the importance of seeing beyond the surface, of making space for people to reveal their true selves. There was a newfound respect, not just for David's talent, but for his quiet strength, his resilience. The barbecue had started like any other, a familiar ritual. But it had ended with a sense of transformation. A subtle shift in the family dynamic, a deeper appreciation for one another. It was a reminder that even in the most ordinary of settings, the most extraordinary things can happen. And that sometimes the quietest voices have the most profound things to say. That barbecue, the one where David's song left everyone silent, wasn't just a pleasant family gathering. It was a turning point. It was a lesson in listening, in loving, and in the beautiful, surprising ways we grow, both as individuals and as a family. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that none of us would ever forget it. The silence he commanded wasn't empty. It was full of emotion, understanding, and a connection that resonated far beyond that one summer evening. It was the sound of hearts opening,